You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find when I logged into the expense software. Maybe I was just looking for an explanation, something that would give me peace of mind and let me move on. Maybe the company had changed its travel policies, maybe she had a valid reason for all the discrepancies. Whatever it was, I needed something solid, something that made sense. I scrolled through the list of her trips, going back to the earliest entries, watching the number of hotel stays drop off over the last 7 months. First, there were a few here and there, nothing strange about it, but then, about 7 months ago, something changed. The hotel charges disappeared completely. It was like her work trips to Cincinnati had turned into day trips with no need for an overnight stay. I leaned in closer, narrowing my eyes, scanning through the rows and columns for anything else unusual. Maybe her company had made some adjustments to how they handled travel, I thought. Maybe they booked all the rooms directly now. So I picked up my phone and dialed one of the finance guys from her company, Jim. I'd met him once at a Christmas party. He was in charge of travel reimbursements, so he'd know about any policy changes. "Jim, hey, I started. "Yeah, what's up?" he interrupted. He sounded distracted. "I'm looking at some of the travel expenses and I noticed something odd. My wife's hotel stays in Cincinnati stopped showing up about 7 months ago. Was there a policy change with booking accommodations or something?" I was trying to keep it casual, but my tone betrayed me. I could feel my pulse pick up. "Oh no, no policy changes," he said, the kind of reassurance that made my gut twist. "I mean, if anything, I would have known, but I can double-check the records for you, if you want." "No need. I'll take a look at the rest of the reports." "Appreciate it." My voice was tight as I ended the call, the answer sitting in my stomach like a heavy rock. I pulled up the reports again and scrolled down to the travel log, my mind racing. She hadn't just stopped staying at hotels. She hadn't even used the corporate card for anything hotel-related in the last few months. That wasn't a policy change. That was a deliberate effort to cover up something, and that something wasn't just an oversight. I felt my chest tighten as the truth slowly started to sink in. I've been lied to. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I picked up the framed picture of us on my desk, our last vacation, a simple trip to the beach a few years ago, and I hurled it across the room. The glass shattered when it hit the wall. I didn't flinch. I didn't care about the mess. My hands were shaking as I stared at the broken frame. The pieces scattered around the room. The photo had been a lie. Everything about this had been a lie. The idea that she was someone I could trust, the family I had built around us, all of it had been built on a foundation of deception. I took a deep breath and looked down at my hands. Now still, my fingers sore from gripping the frame so tightly. I had to stop. I needed a moment, but every thought felt like it was coming at me too fast, too furious. The lies, the manipulation, the guilt. It was all suddenly unbearable. I ran a hand through my hair and took another slow, controlled breath. I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I wasn't going to sit here and pretend everything was fine, like I'd done for years. This wasn't just some small slip-up. This was a betrayal, plain and simple. I stood up, walked over to the window, and stared out at the street below. It felt like my whole world had just crumbled. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let this happen under my nose for so long? My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out. It was a message from her. Just one word. Dinner? I stared at the screen for a long moment. How do you even respond to that? How do you face someone who has lied to you? Someone you've built a life with? Someone who was supposed to be your partner, your team? I could feel the anger rising again, but it wasn't the kind of anger that would help. No, I needed clarity. I needed facts. And I needed to make sure she understood exactly what she had done. But for now, I couldn't talk to her. I couldn't look at her and pretend I didn't know. So I put my phone back in my pocket, took one last look at the shattered photo on the floor, and walked out of the office. The weekend stretched out in front of me like a quiet, agonizing eternity. I didn't know what I was waiting for, or what exactly I expected to happen, but I knew I needed the space. The house felt suffocating, her presence hanging over everything, like some unspoken tension. I spent most of Saturday outside, working in the yard. I needed to focus on something else. I started planting berry bushes along the fence, my hands moving mechanically as I shoved dirt into the holes. There was something oddly soothing about the repetitive motion, the tangible result of my work. The rest of the world could wait while I put my energy into this, into something that didn't involve her, or the lies, or the fucking betrayal. She came out once, just as I was finishing up the last of the bushes. "You're working hard today," she said, standing on the porch in that casual way she did when she wanted to pretend nothing was wrong. "Yeah. Figured I'd finally get these in before winter," I replied, not looking up. My back was sore, but it was easier than looking her in the eyes. "I was thinking maybe we could go out for dinner tonight," she suggested, her voice light, almost too light, like she was trying to keep things normal. "I've got a backache," I said, still not facing her. "Maybe you could just order pizza." She hesitated, like she was trying to gauge whether I was serious or just avoiding her. "Okay," she said finally, though there was a bite of annoyance in her voice. "I'll grab your favorite beer, too." "Thanks," I muttered, my eyes still fixed on the ground. The silence stretched between us as I finished digging a small hole for the next bush. Later that evening, she brought me the beer. I'd already retreated to the bedroom, lying under the covers, even though it was still early. She knocked softly, then opened the door. "Hey," she said, setting the beer on the nightstand. "I got your favorite. Thought you might want to—" "I'm good, just tired," I interrupted, my tone flat. She lingered in the doorway, standing there for a few moments. "Okay," she said quietly, before turning to leave. I heard her sigh before she closed the door, but she didn't come back. That was the thing now. She'd stopped trying. I could feel the space growing between us, like something we'd both been avoiding, like we were pretending nothing was happening. Sunday was the same. I stayed outside most of the day, trying to finish building a new fence in the backyard. My hands were covered in dirt and sweat, my mind numb as I measured, cut, and nailed the planks into place. She came out once to ask if I needed help, but I told her I was fine. "I think you're overdoing it a little," she said, frowning as she stood by the back door. "You sure you're not pushing yourself?" I looked up at her then, the first time I'd really looked her in the eye all weekend. "I'm fine," I repeated, my voice hard. "Just finishing up." "Right," she said, glancing at me uncertainly. She stood there a moment longer before turning back inside. By Monday morning, she was still asleep when I left for work. I didn't wake her, didn't say goodbye. It wasn't like I was angry, I just didn't know what to say anymore. How do you talk to someone you can't trust? How do you even pretend to be normal when everything inside you is screaming that something's wrong? Her texts came later, just like I knew they would. They started innocuously enough, something about how she missed me and hoped I was having a good day. Then, after a few more hours, they turned into something else. Playful, flirty messages. "Thinking about you. Hope we can make up tonight." I didn't reply. I didn't want to. There was nothing I could say. How could I respond to her like nothing had happened when everything had already changed? I was done pretending. By the time I got home, the silence between us was heavier. The house seemed emptier, even though she was right there, sitting in the kitchen, playing with her phone. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Hey," she said, breaking the silence when she noticed me, her voice too soft, too uncertain. "How was your day?" I nodded. "Good." And that was it. No more words. No more pretending. I wasn't ready to talk yet. I wasn't sure I ever would be. That night, after she was asleep, I went into her office. The house was quiet, just the sound of her breathing softly from the other room. I shouldn't have been doing this. I knew that. I shouldn't have even considered crossing that line. But the truth was, I couldn't stop myself. I had already seen enough to make me doubt everything, and I needed to know how deep it went. Her password notebook was right where I thought it would be, tucked inside the drawer of her desk, the pages marked in faded ink from years of use. I grabbed it, flipped it open, and found the combination for her work email in the same place it always was. I didn't hesitate. I typed it in, and within seconds, I was in. I could barely breathe. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was desperation. What had been a vague suspicion had morphed into something more real, more damning. And now, I was about to find out just how deep the lies ran. I clicked into her inbox, skimming through the subject lines. Half of them didn't even seem work-related. They were from Mike, the coworker from Cincinnati. As I opened one, my stomach sank. It was full of those personal messages, the kind you never expect to find, the kind you never want to see. I felt sick. The words blurred on the screen, but I made myself keep reading. It wasn't just a few friendly notes back and forth. It was explicit, detailing encounters they had during her supposed business trips. The trips she said were about work, the trips that didn't add up. My hand shook as I scrolled further. The texts went on for months, documenting their encounters, the hotels, the cities, Cincinnati, Atlanta, places I'd never questioned because I thought they were just business trips, but now I knew. I clicked another message. This one had a link, a password-protected site. I clicked it, and there they were. Videos. I watched, stunned, as they came up on the screen. Her, him, together, over and over again, in hotel rooms, in cars. Each scene a slap in the face, each second chipping away at the world I thought I knew. I didn't feel anger at first, just numbness. I downloaded every single one. I had to. I needed them all. I needed the proof. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just an observer of my own life. I was watching a version of it being ripped apart. I sat there, staring at the screen until my eyes burned. By the time midnight rolled around, I was still in front of the computer, frozen in place. I hadn't moved, hadn't blinked in what felt like hours. I couldn't process what I was seeing, but I also couldn't look away. I leaned back in the chair, my hands heavy in my lap. The weight of it all hit me then. The lies, the betrayal. It wasn't just about sex or cheating. It was about everything. The trust we'd built, the years we'd spent together, the family I thought we were. I took a long breath and stood up, my legs unsteady. I should have felt something more than this, a rage, a sadness even. But instead, I just felt hollow, empty. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew this couldn't go on. Not like this, not anymore. I walked back to my bedroom, careful not to wake her. She was still asleep, her back turned to me, the covers tangled around her. She looked peaceful, like everything was fine. I paused in the doorway for a moment, watching her. There was no way back from this. She had no idea what I'd found, no clue that her world was about to come crashing down. And that thought of her waking up to the truth was the only thing that made me feel alive again. It wasn't going to be quick. There was no going back now. I couldn't just sit on this anymore. The truth was burning a hole inside me, and the only way to put it out was to confront the guy. Mike. I needed to see his face when I told him I knew. I had to know how he'd react, whether he'd crumble or try to fight it. I hired a private investigator to follow him. It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. Mike was predictable. Every Thursday he hit a brewery in downtown Cincinnati after work. That was my opening. I flew in the next morning, rented a car, and showed up just as Mike was pulling in. It felt strange, the city unfamiliar and distant. Yet it was like I was walking through a fog, the reality of it all starting to settle in. I stood outside the brewery, watching him from across the street as he walked in, all relaxed, like he had no clue the storm was coming. I stayed there for a few minutes, trying to slow my pulse, trying to brace myself for the confrontation. When I finally walked in, I spotted him right away. He was sitting at the bar, laughing with some of his buddies. For a second, I felt that wave of disgust in my stomach. He was so casual, so normal. Everything was fine in his world. I wanted to rip that illusion away. I walked up to him, took a breath, and tapped him on the shoulder. He turned, a surprised smile spreading across his face. "Hey man, what's up?" I didn't shake his hand. I didn't offer any pleasantries. I just sat down across from him. "Mike, we need to talk." His smile faltered, confusion clouding his face. "What's going on, man?" I didn't waste any time. "I know you've been sleeping with my wife." His face went white. For a second I thought he was going to laugh, to brush it off as some kind of joke. But he didn't. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly open. "Look, I don't know what you—" he started, but I cut him off. "Save it," I said, leaning forward. "I've seen everything, the messages, the videos." I kept my voice low, steady. "So don't try to deny it." His eyes shifted nervously, his mouth tight. "Listen, man, it's not like—" I slapped the table, cutting him off again. "Don't tell me it's not like that. I've seen it. I know it's exactly what it is." He looked around the bar, clearly realizing this wasn't just a casual conversation. People were starting to notice. I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him downplay this. "Here's the deal," I said, my voice cold and direct. "You can keep pretending like nothing's wrong, but I know what you've been doing. I've got all the proof I need, and I'm going to make sure it's all out there, unless you leave my wife alone. And don't warn her. Don't give her a heads up, because if you do, I'll make sure everyone you know sees those videos. All of them. So don't try me." His face shifted then, the bravado melting away. He was scared now. He didn't want his friends to know, didn't want his reputation ruined. He was already caught. I wasn't going to," he stammered, but I didn't let him finish. "I don't want to hear it. Just stay away from her," I said, standing up, the finality in my tone leaving no room for argument. "Or this won't just be between us. Understand?" He nodded slowly, not meeting my eyes. I gave him one last look before turning to leave, my pulse still high, my mind racing. As I walked out of the bar, I felt a strange sense of relief. But it wasn't the relief I expected. It wasn't closure. It was something colder. The first part of the plan was done, but the real mess was still coming. And I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But it was already too late to back out. The next morning, I walked into the lawyer's office, carrying the weight of everything I'd uncovered, the videos, the lies. Everything I had been avoiding finally had a name, a face, and it was time to do something about it. The lawyer was already waiting for me in her office. She'd seen cases like this before. She didn't look surprised when I handed her the file with the videos on a flash drive. She didn't flinch when I explained what I had found. "Good work," she said, flipping through the file, her fingers lingering on the videos. "This will be all the evidence we need. It's clear. We can move forward with this." I nodded, barely able to focus on her words. She talked about paperwork, logistics, the divorce process, but it all felt like static in the background. I didn't need to hear any of it. I knew exactly what I was doing now. "Okay," I said, cutting through her explanation. "Let's get this started. I want her things packed while she's away. I want them moved to her parents' house, and I want the locks changed. I don't care what happens after that." She raised an eyebrow, not in judgment, but in recognition of how done I was with this whole situation. "We'll make it happen. I'll have the movers contact you when they're ready to pack her stuff. I'll get the legal documents ready to remove her name from everything." I could feel something inside me shift, something heavy. It wasn't the kind of satisfaction I'd expected, but a sense of finality. The weight was lifting, piece by piece. It wasn't a clean cut, but it was as close as I could get. By the time I left the lawyer's office, I was oddly calm, like a part of me had already gone numb. It was over, right? It had to be. And the rest? Well, the rest was just cleaning up the mess. I didn't feel like going home, so I drove to the yard instead. I spent the evening planting hops in the garden, the repetitive task grounding me. Each hole I dug, each hop vine I carefully placed in the dirt, brought a sense of peace. There was no drama here, no betrayal, no lies. Just the earth, the plants, and the quiet. It was the first time in days that I didn't feel like I was drowning. I didn't know if I was still angry, or if I was just empty now, but I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I had everything I needed. The door to the house creaked open just as I finished, but I didn't turn around. I could hear her footsteps on the porch. She was trying to be casual, trying to get my attention, but I stayed focused on the hops, my hands working without thinking. "I was thinking of making dinner," she said from the doorway, her voice light but careful. She didn't know what to say. She could feel the space between us, but she didn't want to face it. I didn't answer. I just finished tying the vine to the support post and stood up, brushing my hands off on my pants. "I'm fine," I said finally, keeping my tone neutral. "I'll make something later. Maybe you should order out." She didn't reply right away. I could hear the hesitation in the air, but I didn't care. It was the first time in a long while I'd felt like I was in control of something. I didn't need to look at her, didn't need to hear her apology. She'd made her choices. Now I was making mine, and she could stand there or she could walk away. Either way, I wasn't going to play the role of the fool anymore. The silence between us stretched out longer than I expected, but I didn't care. She finally retreated, her footsteps fading back into the house. And I went back to work, digging in the garden, the weight of everything that had happened settling into the rhythm of my hands, letting it all go. The phone rang at 9:15 a.m. I knew it was her. It had to be. She was on another one of her work trips, still trying to keep up the charade. I didn't pick up. Instead, I watched the screen light up with her name. For a few seconds, I stared at the number, willing myself to stay calm. When it buzzed again, I finally swiped the screen and answered, my voice barely a whisper. "Hello?" I said, cold and steady. "Hey, I'm on the road, but I wanted to check in. You've been distant lately, she said, her voice pitched like she was trying to sound concerned. But there was no real warmth behind it, just that calculated tone. What's going on? Cut the shit, I replied flatly. You really think I don't know? Know what? She sounded confused, but I could tell it was an act. I know everything, Emma. I know about you and Mike. I know about the trips, the lies, the texts, everything. You're not fooling me anymore. My voice was getting tighter, but I couldn't stop. I needed her to hear this. Her breath caught, and for a moment she was silent. It was like she was gathering her words, trying to come up with some excuse. Listen, she started, but I cut her off. Don't try to explain. I'm not interested in hearing whatever excuse you've cooked up. You've been sleeping with him for months, and you thought I wouldn't find out? The videos were a nice touch, by the way. There was a long pause on the other end, her silence stretching thin between us. I never thought... She tried again, but this time I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. She was losing control. I could feel it. Stop lying, I snapped. I'm done. I've already posted the videos. The shock in her voice was palpable. What do you mean posted? What videos? The ones of you and Mike, I said. You know, the ones that prove you've been sleeping together while you were supposedly on business trips. The ones you didn't think I'd find. I paused, letting her process that, then added, I posted them to your Facebook page. They're up now. Everyone can see them. She gasped. You... what? Number? You didn't. Please, you can check for yourself, I cut in. I've changed the password, so you won't be able to do anything about it. They're out there now. The truth is out, Emma. Her voice broke, the mask slipping. Why? Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? I want the truth, I said, my voice steady, and I want you to know that I'm done with you. This marriage is over. Please don't, she stammered, her words coming out in a frantic rush. We can work through this. I swear, I didn't mean for it to... No, I cut her off again. You didn't just make a mistake. You've been lying to me for months, and you thought you could get away with it. There's nothing left to fix. The line went dead quiet. I could hear her breathing, shallow and panicked. But I wasn't going to be swayed. I wasn't going to play the role of the forgiving husband anymore, not after everything she'd done. Do you even care about the damage you've caused? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her fighting to hold it together, but it was no use. She knew this was over, and there was nothing she could say to change it. I knew that too. The call ended abruptly, and I was left standing there, staring at my phone, the weight of what I had done sinking in. The silence felt like a weight pressing down on me, but I didn't feel the guilt I thought I would. Instead, I felt strangely calm, detached. It was done. The worst was over. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was my son. I hesitated before picking up, not sure how to explain it to him. When I answered, his voice came through, shocked and hurt. Dad, what's going on? Why would you post those? Is Mom okay? I'm fine, son. But your mom? She's not the woman you think she is, I said, my voice firm. I did it because I'm done being lied to. I'm divorcing her, and I want you to know that none of this is your fault. He stayed quiet for a moment, the weight of it all settling in. So, it's really over? Yeah, I replied, my tone softening a little. It's over. I'm not going back. I'm not going to keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. He took a deep breath. Okay. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just know that I'm here, all right? This is hard for both of us, but it's the right thing. You'll see that. He was quiet again, and I let the silence stretch. He didn't have to understand right now. I didn't expect him to, but in time, he would. We all would. The call ended, and I set the phone down on the counter, the reality of it all settling around me. There was no going back now. I looked out the window, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard. This was my life now. No more lies, no more pretending, just the aftermath of everything I'd uncovered, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The phone rang just after lunch. My son's call had thrown me off balance, but now it was her father. I almost didn't pick it up, but the pressure of it all had been building, so I answered, knowing I couldn't avoid it forever. Hello, I said, my voice a little harsher than I meant it to be. Daniel, it's me, he said. I need to talk to you about what happened. I could already feel the tension in the air, even through the phone. I braced myself for what was coming. Your mother saw the videos, he continued. And, well, we both think you should take them down. I bit back a laugh. You want me to take them down? After everything? He sighed, his voice tired. I get it, Daniel. I do. But this is going too far. Your mother's upset, and honestly, so am I. This isn't the way to handle it. I didn't respond at first. My mind flashed back to the moment I clicked post, to the reaction I knew was coming, to how fast the messages started flooding in. I wasn't sure if he expected me to feel guilty, but he wasn't going to get that from me. I've already made my decision, I said, keeping my tone even. I'm done with her. I'm done with all of this. She's the one who dragged me into this mess. She's the one who betrayed me. Look, I'm not here to blame you, he said quickly. I know you're hurt, but you're making this harder than it has to be. She's my daughter, and I don't want this to get worse. We can work something out. I let out a breath. What exactly do you want me to do, Mike? Take the videos down, he said firmly, and then we'll talk about how she can stay with us when she gets back. She doesn't have anywhere else to go, Daniel. I paused. It wasn't the first time I'd thought about what her options would be when she came back, but that didn't mean I was ready to help her. Not after everything, not after the humiliation she had put me through. I'll take the videos down, I said, finally breaking the silence. But only if she's staying with you. You can tell her when she gets back, you can explain to her what kind of mess she's left me in, and you can tell her I'm divorcing her. That's all I'm willing to do. There was a long pause before he spoke again. I understand, Daniel. I do. But I'd still like to think we can work things out. This is still family, right? No, I said, cutting him off before he could say anything more. Family doesn't do this. You don't treat family like this. You don't betray them like she did. She made her choice. I'm just cleaning up the mess. He was quiet for a while. Then he sighed again, his voice softer. I get it, but please, if you can, do it for her. Do it for the sake of something. I wanted to tell him it wasn't for her, that nothing I was doing was for her anymore, but I didn't. I couldn't. I'll take the videos down, I said again, finally. But I won't be doing it for her. And you're right. This is family. But family's already broken. She did that, not me. There was nothing more to say. I ended the call and stared at the screen of my phone, trying to wrap my mind around it all. Her father thought he could fix this, that he could make me forget what she had done, that he could make me care again. But I wasn't going to be the guy who patched things up for the sake of appearances. I had made my choice, and I wasn't looking back. A few hours later, I logged into her Facebook and took the videos down. I didn't feel any relief doing it. I wasn't trying to be the bigger person. I was doing what I had to do to keep control. When I was done, I sat back in the chair, staring at the screen. The mess had been cleaned up for now, but I knew it wasn't over. She would come back, and she would have questions. But I was ready for whatever came next. I didn't need to fix anything anymore. I'd already let go. And when she got back to her parents' house, I'd make sure she knew it. I wasn't coming back. It had been 3 weeks since she'd been sent packing to her parents' place. 3 weeks of quiet, of barely thinking about her, of breathing in the space I'd reclaimed. I didn't expect her to reach out, but of course she did. She couldn't let it go. The message came in while I was on the back porch, taking a break from the garden. Can we meet? I need to talk to you. I didn't respond immediately. I stared at the screen, weighing the options. She had the nerve to ask me to meet her. After everything, it almost felt laughable. But the thing was, I couldn't just let this hang forever. The end needed to come with something. I wasn't going to drag it out. I told her to meet me at noon in the backyard. It was direct, to the point. No room for any half-hearted apologies or unnecessary words. I didn't want to hear them. I'd already heard all I needed to know. When noon rolled around, I was sitting on the back steps, waiting for her. The sun was high, cutting through the trees in slivers of light. The air was thick, like it was holding its breath, waiting for whatever was coming next. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just done. She pulled into the driveway right on time, but she didn't get out of the car immediately. I watched her through the window as she sat there for a moment, probably trying to figure out what to say. It didn't matter. I already knew what was coming. It was all going to be the same, an attempt at fixing something that couldn't be fixed. Finally, she stepped out of the car, wearing that same look she always did when she was trying to keep things from breaking, too perfect, too rehearsed. She walked slowly toward me, like we were about to have a civilized conversation. But I wasn't here for any of that. She stopped a few feet away from me, her hands clasped together, a little too tight. "I've been thinking about everything," she started, her voice softer than I expected. "About us, about the mistakes I've made." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice flat. "This isn't about apologies. I don't need your regrets. I don't want them." Her eyes flickered with surprise, but she quickly masked it. "I know it's a lot to process. I want you to understand that it wasn't about us." I stood up and took a step forward. "It wasn't about love either, was it?" Her face froze for a second. I could see the guilt flash across her eyes, and I could hear the lie forming in her throat. But she didn't try to deny it. Instead, she hung her head slightly and muttered, "No, it wasn't about love." I nodded. That was all I needed to hear. "Then what was it about?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Because I don't get it. You've ruined everything, Emma. You ruined the trust, the family, the life we had. And for what? For some fleeting excitement? For Mike? For that?" She flinched at the mention of his name, but didn't respond. She couldn't. What was left to say? "I can't fix this, and neither can you," I said, my voice cold now. "You had your chance. You had plenty of chances, and you blew it. Don't you dare try to spin this into something it isn't." She opened her mouth to say something else, but I held up my hand, stopping her before she could speak. "I don't need to hear anything else from you," I said, shaking my head. "I've listened for years. I've tried to make this work, but you don't get to ask for another chance now, not after everything. The kids, they're not your excuse. You should have thought about them before you made this mess." She winced, her face flushing with shame. But she didn't argue. It wasn't a matter of what she said anymore. It was about what she had done, and nothing she could say would make it right. "I'm just cleaning up the mess you made," I added, my tone harder now. "This is on you, Emma. It's always been on you." She looked at me then, eyes wide, finally realizing that there was nothing left to fix, nothing left to salvage. I wasn't coming back, not for her, not for any of it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but it was too late. The apology wasn't for me. It was for her own guilt. It wasn't enough. I didn't say anything else. I turned away from her and walked back to the garden. She stood there, frozen, watching me go. But I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. When I reached the edge of the yard, I grabbed the trowel and dug into the earth again, not needing to hear her leave. I already knew she would. And when she did, it felt like the last piece of her was gone for good. It had been 7 months since I posted those videos to her Facebook. 7 months of silence, of moving on in ways I hadn't expected, but needed. The divorce was final now, officially. We signed the papers in the lawyer's office, her with a look of defeat I wasn't sure was entirely genuine, and me, just cold. I didn't want any more drama. I didn't need any more of her in my life. We'd agreed to keep things civil, mostly for the kids, but it didn't change the fact that everything had shifted. I couldn't go back to her, even if I wanted to. Every time I thought about what we had, it all came back to the videos, the betrayal, the lies. It poisoned everything I ever thought I knew about her. At family gatherings, we kept our distance. If we had to talk, it was polite, guarded, surface level. We weren't the couple we used to be. Hell, we weren't even strangers anymore. We were just two people in the same room, pretending that none of this was still hanging between us. I spent most of my time at home, focusing on work, picking up new projects around the house, finding new ways to occupy myself that didn't involve thinking about her. The yard became my escape. I started more projects, planting new shrubs, redoing parts of the fence, trying out a few new fishing techniques. There was peace in all of it. It wasn't the peace I wanted, peace with her, but it was the only peace I could find. I started making my fishing trips a regular thing, something I'd always said I'd do more of. I used to tell her about all the great spots I wanted to hit, but now I went by myself, and it was freeing. The water, the solitude, the time to think, or more often, the time to not think, was what I needed. I couldn't remember the last time I really smiled with her, if I ever did. I knew I'd thought we were happy, or at least I tried to. But now, when I thought about those days, all that came up was the image of her with him, the nights she was supposed to be working late, the trips she claimed were about business, and all I could see was the way she'd looked at me, the guilt she hid so well behind her eyes. It wasn't the ending I wanted, it wasn't how I imagined things would go, but it was the one I could live with. If I'd stayed, I would have been a liar too, and I wasn't about to live that way anymore. I still had days where I thought about what could have been. I thought about the life we'd built, the house, the holidays, the routines that we'd gotten so comfortable in. But every time that thought crept up, I remembered what she did, and it erased it. Every single time. I was moving on, but it wasn't easy. There were days when I missed the idea of us, but I wasn't sure I'd ever get back to trusting anyone the same way. Not after her. But in the end, I knew I had to keep moving forward. I had to build something new, even if it was just for me. There was too much left to do to waste time looking back.